fact that there is a grant that is being issued to the local community. Can you tell me what that grant is and what is going to be encompassed within that grant?
I don't know. Somebody was telling me it's on your front page, and I understand it is a community block development grant. Now, if you want to go back and pull up the sir.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
The report that I showed you the front page of, there's a database, and I can show you how to get to that database on the UN's website, and it's alphabetical. You can pull down every country in this world's report to the UN. We made a report in '97 and again in 2002, and it goes through those community block development grants. So you could take that report.
Block development grant, and it's not a government grant that is being issued to the state or to our community.
I didn't catch the first part.
I said, you said it's a community development grant that is being issued to us, but is it a government grant such as the federal government or state government?
The newspaper article to determine the answer to that, because I think it is, but I'm not positive. Okay. So it's in your newspaper today. I was just told about it, so that's the reason I commented.
Next, may I continue?
Sure.
Okay. You're talking about hole in one, you're talking about sun and shine, and you're talking about the transition, the city becoming a transition town, all right? And permaculture being an issue as far as them using permaculture to become a, what's the word I'm looking for? Transition town or anything.
Right.
Okay. You interviewed people to see what their original thoughts were?
No. Matter of fact, there is a Galbraith Dodd. He is a professor at a university, Church of Christ University, Lipscomb, out of Nashville. And and when I first found all this information, I really wanted to talk to him and some people from Lipscomb University, because I have a good friend that is a member of the Church of Christ for many years, and I know that they are fundamentally conservative. And I thought, surely to goodness, we could talk to them. Well, in making these presentations over the couple of years that I've been doing this with this segment, I was talking about that, was wanting to meet somebody from Lipscomb. And the guy said, well, I was on the board of directors or had some high position with Lipscomb. And he says they've gone south on us. There's just no need to talk to them. So that's the last thing I've heard. And this is the first chance I've had to come to Lewis County, and I've talked to some people that knew some people here, I just didn't want to come in and just say, I've got something to show you. I really wanted to not have an adversarial situation with anybody, because I really think that once we are alerted to this information, I think the truth will out, and we'll, begin to understand what's happening to us. I hope that answers.
That answers, and I would like to make a statement. Being associated with the group, all right, and being associated with the group for the last 3 years, all right, I have yet to see anything within that group that wants the property to be taken away from us. All right, we are stout believers in owning our property, keeping our property to ourselves. What we normally do is we have meetings on how to defend ourselves, how to fend for ourselves, have the community come together, and in case of there is a disaster, how can we handle the disaster with outside help? All right, so that's the sustainability part of the program. Now, the terms that we are using might be captured by the green group now and has made it unacceptable for a lot of people to really appreciate what the community is really trying to do. I would suggest very, very strongly that if you get an opportunity, have an interview with the individuals that started this group and see what their initial thoughts were and their beliefs were. I would appreciate it very, very much.
Yeah, well, I do, and I will, and if you can set it up, I'll be more than glad to. I will say that I have read enough information from Albert Bates. I don't know the man, but he was at the Rio Plus 20 conference. He did make a number of internet blog comments, rather lengthy, and that from his comments and other information that I've read from the Eco Village, Global Eco Village Network, that they're all pretty much involved in this at some level.
See, that's very interesting that you're saying that, right?
Excuse me, has only been to 3 meetings and really a speaker, and he is not involved in the group.
I would not, actually, I would agree with that, because what I think is that a lot of these people use well-meaning individuals to say that they have a support group when in fact they don't. And if they told us the people that are involved in this, I think the people would just leave. They wouldn't support it at all. That's just my opinion. So I'm saying that they put enough good-sounding phrases with this, and you really have to look underneath, because in the beginning, I think the whole thing was railroaded in the wrong direction. And in order to build a seeming constituency.
It wasn't railroaded in the wrong direction.
All right, the direction has been fine. All right, the terminology has changed, which is railroading it now. All right,
Well,
as far as opinion goes.
Right.
All right, so you have formed an opinion about the group. All right, that is erroneous.
Well, I'm not saying you or your group. I know. I realize you're
You're using the. Excuse me. I have to kick back a little.
Okay.
All right? You're using the presentation of the Sun and Shine group. All right, as a transition time. All right, and as a. I keep on stumbling over the word.
It's a lifestyle.
It is a lifestyle. I agree with that. And as long as it's voluntary, I absolutely agree with you. If you want to do that, that's fine with me.
There is no intent, all right, to support Agenda 21. within this-
Have you read Rob Hopkins? Do you know who Rob Hopkins is?
No.
Go read what Rob Hopkins. He's the head of the transition community in England. Read what he has to say.
If we're talking about economic localization, then that's really going to need these new businesses, new institutions, new infrastructure to be put into place. And I think it's really the role of transition initiatives, or people allied to transition initiatives, to start putting that in place in a way which embodies the principles of social justice, of inclusion, of fairness, to get that in there from the beginning. So one of the ingredients there is social enterprise, the idea of creating businesses based at the beginning on the idea that they're not just there to profit the founders, but they're there to serve some larger, wider social purpose.
Read what Albert Bates has to say.
And so around 2006, I decided it was time to devote a little time, energy, and money into raising consciousness in Lewis County, Tennessee. And so we started this program. Initially, we just called it, I was already familiar with Rob Hopkins and the work he was doing in starting transition towns at that time, but we started just calling it Film Night. And we might bring in outside speakers, or we might have potluck dinner or something. But we got working with a local church and then a local Chamber of Commerce, and started doing this film night, and got space in the school, the town school, and started doing that. And, you know, I'm in a county, the whole county has a population of under 4,000 people, and it's been pretty stable at that, but it's very small, very rural, and very poor. And so, you know, to get people out on a weeknight to watch a movie is not always easy, but we would show things like An Inconvenient Truth to try to get a little consciousness raising going. People here don't believe in climate change. So if you raise those subjects, you get looked at like you're some kind of weirdo conspiracy theorist. And we had to kind of avoid those tripwires as we got going. So what we found was we could approach people on the basis of their Swiss heritage. This town here was settled by Swiss immigrants. That all led to Swiss immigration into the area, brought in by the railroads to make railroad ties from the forest here. And that heritage we could relate to, because we could say, okay, when we say green, we mean no waste. Frugal, okay? Let's be frugal. And so people related to that, and we started having these nights where we would just gather together and talk and come up with ideas for community beautification projects. And then around 2008, we had our first, what we called the Financial Permaculture course, which gave us an opportunity to explain permaculture, but it was in the sense of improving your financial outlook. And we had 130 people show up for that, which was great. We issued chamber bucks, which was our first alternative currency here, where we would redeem your your chamber dollars, which we issued in $5, $10, and $20 denominations, at any local store that was a member of the Chamber of Commerce. In that way, in small ways, without actually trying to cross any red lines that would anger people, we gradually won over the population. I mean, I still get occasionally some issues coming up like, is Transition Towns part of Agenda 21? Because they see Agenda 21 as this UN plot for one world government. And they don't want to be associated with anything to do with that. And we say, well, we're not political. But we did become the 25th transition town. We got the mayor and the city council, all 16 county commissioners, to join, and to every single elected official in Hohenwald, Tennessee, signed on to a proclamation. And we had the great rollout, unleashing of our transition town, and became the 25th transition town in the United States.
Well, I'm saying that when we look at the people that are presenting themselves as the leaders of the transition community, and you read the principles of permaculture, and that's all I did was I just went out and got what they wrote. And as a matter of fact, that magazine I showed you, I have the copy of it.
Sir, if I may. Sure. I am one of the writers. I am one of the formers. I am one of the people that has worked in this community for the last 6 years to help with this community. And it has absolutely nothing to do with Agenda 21.
Well,
we are about trying to help take care of the community. Now, some of the terminology and some of the other things that may have crossfired and done with all of this, I can understand that. But I have some concerns when it is trying to make it appear as if we are some supporters that are trying to do something to start an Agenda 21 movement in the community, when that is absolutely not true at all. As a matter of fact, I'm also a real estate agent, and so I feel, to be honest with you, a little taken back while ago when you made the comment about real estate agents taking advantage of certain situations and other things, because, yes, I agree with you, there are places that absolutely do the things we're talking about, but you have to look at each community on an individual basis, and I can assure you that our county government, our city government, and our community at large is a very caring community, and the main basis of us doing anything that we are doing is to take care of our community ourselves. I'm also a county commissioner. I'm also on the city planning commission, so I can assure you as a member of all of those roles of what our initial thing was to start with.
Feelings don't change. Is written or documentation. And if you take that Agenda 21, it plainly says that it is part of a sustainable development movement that's being enacted at the local, national, and international level. And I can't help what is written. If you feel put off by what I presented, I'm sorry. But take a good long look, because this is going on in all across this country, across the globe. I just came from Australia, where the very same thing's going on. Their local comprehensive plans that were looked at while we were there have all the same phrases, have all the same biodiversity treaty tenets in it. It is all across this country. And I know that there are people that have been drug in this or have cooperated with it unknowingly, and I'm sorry, but I can't change what other people have already said and done.
I think the key word here is the soft sell.
Soft sell. The soft sell. Rather than showing you the climate change treaty where they blow people up, they put it in the land use planning. And they put it as a policy statement that says that we're going to limit what you can do.
Sir, we agree with you on the Agenda 21. Right. We're with you 100%. We understand the concept. Yes. We understand their actions and how they are doing the soft sell. Right. And we have done research on the Agenda 21. Sir, I understand the proclamation. That's fine, all right?
We're not saying this for the public to see.
Yes.
You guys have signed this, all your leaders, and it said, "We the people proclaim." That's you, buddy.
Okay.
Hey,
when was that written, sir? When was that written? When was that incorporated?
2009. Can't you tell me you did it?
What do you mean? Well, let me ask you, how about recanting? How about
Adopted
When?
by the Lewis County Commissioners, April 2009.
2009, all right? Okay, the terminology that has been captured in that.
Terminology?
Sir, he's not even a commissioner.
I'm just a citizen.
You are following this, or you're not obeying the law, citizen.
Wait.
That's not a law.
It's
We're
just a
getting
proclamation.
personal, let's keep it.
Yeah,
Let's keep it at a
just
high
let me
level.
make a suggestion. Investigate sustainable development and its connection, because if you just open the cover of this book, you'll find that it's just full of sustainable development.
Yes, I understand.
And all I'm saying is investigate it. If it is true, then have another proclamation that say that we disavow this one.
I am in the middle of investigating, all right?
There you go.
Do me a favor.
Yep.
All right? Investigate the original intent of that proclamation, all right? And give us the same respect that we are giving you as far as researching Agenda 21 and how it is in our community.
Well, I'm going to say, I'll have to agree with this gentleman that the intent of the proclamation is plain, is that we are to adopt the tenets of sustainable development and inspire others to do the same. And that's pretty much a verbatim rendition of that. Now, I would say that since that has been put in writing and on the internet, that it deserves to be readdressed. And if indeed sustainable development is part and parcel of this, then I would come out and say, well, we need to rewrite at least part of this, and that we need to recant that one plank. Just all I'm saying.
And if that occurs, you'll take the slide off, the presentation off?
I will put that in, that having talked to officials in Hole in Wall, they have now examined, and just like the county commission in Baldwin County that adopted a comprehensive plan that was chock full of sustainable development, they recanted, and I was awfully proud of them. And I'll come up here and make videos of the signing of a recanting of that, so that I can show that as an example of what happens to logical, founded individuals that see that sustainable development is tied into Agenda 21, and what happens when they understand it.
Okay. Would you agree that what has happened is that the terminology within this proclamation are words that have been captured and misconstrued it using?
Most definitely.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, that is typically what happens, is that the elected official is unaware. He usually has a planner who is involved in all of this. As a matter of fact, in Dothan, there's a planner that has written several comprehensive plans, one for Shelby County, Alabama, that is just full of this stuff. He got a job and a pay raise, moved to Dothan, became buddies with all the elected officials, and they bought into everything that he was saying, not realizing the underlying definitions of the words and phrases that he was using. Sir.
There's a lady out, please.
Okay.
Oh, excuse me.
I investigated that. It's really scary, and I don't think anybody in Lewis County really knew what was going on. But about 3 or 4 hours, because my husband was on that signature, and he and I both read it, and we don't think it, we want the people in our county would not want our land to be taken away from us or anything like that. But all I want to say is just read. Have y'all looked it up on the internet?
Oh, yeah.
Have you read about 3 or 4 hours of every little EPA and all this, that, and the other?
No, I haven't read all of that, but that has nothing to do with what this was, John.
Well, I know, that's what I'm saying, it has nothing to do with that, I really believe that, it's just, you just need to just take your names, I wouldn't have my name on it, as far as after what I read.
Let me say that it's used by the...
I'm saying that they was just taken,
They were taken advantage of, and it's still...
That's my feeling.
And it's still being used to further sustainable development and transition communities. Sir?
It appears to me, as I read this, it just looks like that there's somebody out there that wants to say, if you'll be just good little boys and girls and do what we say, and eventually this thing grows so big that it just sucks us in, and then we don't have any control over it. And I believe that some in our community have been, I believe that true, and I hate to say this because, you know, I care about the people around here, and some of the people, some people are gonna be angry at me when I say this, but I believe that they've been suckered by some of this. And the problem is that when it gets so big, there's just nothing we can do about it. And we'll just drain right down.
Time.
I've studied societies and history, and very common in communist countries, they issue new definitions to words that we find acceptable.
Thank you.
So when the communist says,
Yes.
we want a democratic society, it does not mean the democratic society that we know of.
That's right.
It means they want the same old with a new name. And they're still going to have the same controls to get us to buy into what they're doing. We have to be careful of what other organizations are doing and bringing us words that seem acceptable, but we have to understand what it is their plan is, like what you're saying.
So now let me ask you, what would you do when you find out that the definitions have been changed and the words that you had agreed to now don't mean what you think they do? What would you do?
I would disavow what I signed.
Thank you. Let me,
I would say that
Jonathan had his, and then we'll go to this gentleman in the blue shirt.
Are you aware that right now
Oh,
in
yeah.
North Carolina, there's a college course being taught and you can get a degree in it?
Yes.
And the recipients of that degree are called change agents.
That's
And they're sent into these counties to coerce and to make people start.
That is a course at Chapel Hill, and they've been teaching it since the late 90s. And part of their program is to go out into a community and try to change the customs of the community. That's part of their graduating course. And wait a minute, this guy had his hand up.
Go ahead, Ben.
I'm now the county mayor of Lewis County. I was one of the commissioners who signed this. There was no intent on our part to do what you say this does.
Wait a minute
No, I'm not attacking you.
Okay.
I'm not attacking you. I'm just explaining. And I know everybody on there that signed that. There is not a person on there that would disavow God and want to worship Mother Earth or anything like that. And I'm going to try to make this short. I grew up on a farm, poor people, eking out a living, had a wonderful life. We were a sustainable farm. We grew 90% of what we ate. We got coffee and salt and all those kind of things, but we grew our own hogs and chickens and turkeys and gardens and that kind of thing. So to me, what this said when I read it was that you try to survive on your own, that you don't take this money from the government and all this kind of thing. I truly guess we didn't, I guess we weren't smart enough to know that we were that poor, you know. But the thing about it is, I feel like that I made a mistake signing these. But what I believe is that if you make a mistake, you admit it, you repent of it, and you try to straighten it out.
Amen.
And here's what. But these people that are in the sunshine and that kind of thing, those are good people. They love this community. They would not, I guarantee you, they're godly people. They're not going to do anything that would hurt this community or this state or this country. And what I promise.
No, knowingly.
That's what I said, not knowingly.
Sorry. You mistaken, if you would,
What?
because I am part of Sun and Shine.
I'm saying you would not knowingly hurt anybody here.
I do not hurt anyone in this lifetime. I am a nurse by trade. I am dedicated to helping people. What I've done in the past year at Sun and Shine is teach how to deal with a disaster.
Let's let Van finish, and then you and I can talk. Go ahead, Van.
But he's right. He's right.
But
These people,
But
these
not
people
knowing,
didn't.
I can do something by accident that can
Well, but-
cause harm to someone else, not knowing that I've caused that harm.
What they're doing is trying to help their community.
Right.
Am I right?
Yes.
That's what they're doing. They're trying to help their community.
I'll
They're
help
good
you
people.
teach how to grow things that survive here, not
To help people eat better and
to
live
help
better.
people eat better.
But here, just to finish, and I'll try to hurry on through this, but just to finish is, when I do realize I've made a mistake, I do repent of it, and I try to right it. And I, as county mayor, I can't promise that I can get this done, but I will work towards getting this repealed, and I'll explain it to the county commission. But like I say, every person, I know every man and woman that signed that, and they love this town, this county, and they're here for the good of the people.
Let me say that if you can get that done, I know that there are 3 people here that have cameras, and they'll show up and they'll record that. And when this presentation's made again, believe me, what was done to rescind, so that the people that are supporting, like Albert Bates and the other Global Village people, will now not be able to use that to further their agenda. I know, but I'm not saying that. I'm saying that this proclamation can be used to further their agenda. And that by having a filming that you are rescinding this, it would make a big statement towards those people, just like the Alabama law did.
Real quick.
Yes.
The terminology of what I was talking about using new meanings to the words, from George Orwell's book, 1984,
Yes.
is called doublespeak.
Yes.
Read the book.
My question is on clarifying more of what he's talking about. I heard something a minute ago about changing the definition of words that we accept. When I first looked into all this stuff, I saw something very different. It's called sustainable. I never heard of that before. Anybody here heard of that before? Say 10 years ago?
No, not 10 years.
Never heard. I'm 69. 10 years ago, I hadn't heard of it. But I have heard.
Self-sufficiency and self-determination.
I have heard of self-sufficient, and that's a man in overalls with an old mule, and I come from people like that. I know what self-sufficient means.
Jim,
But they're saying sustainable is self-sufficient, and it's something else. It's not.
It's the doublespeak. It's changing the meaning.
right, Jim?
Folks, Mr. Casey didn't come here to cause controversy.
Everyone at each other's throat. He came here. He came here to educate us.
And we're educating also.
To educate us, and he's done a good job of it. One, and number two, on top of that, if you recall up in Columbia, you're talking about how they just come in and take your property. Mm-hmm. Remember that the black man got up and he said, "My grandmother left me land," and the city decided they were going to build some houses on it. So they just came in and took the land, and it wasn't just a lot, folks. It was some acreage. I forget how much. 140 acres. When it's all said and done, you got $8,000 for it. $8,000. Now this come under Agenda 21.
Let me say that the actual definition for sustainable development was coined by the Grow-Harlem-Brundtland Commission in 1987. The tenets of sustainable development are in NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act. Intergenerational equity, social equity, all of those things that you saw. So when you use the term, you know what you're speaking of, but the general audience hears something that's defined off of another set of books. And let me say that please don't do that, because you're helping them be perceived as having a constituency. That's mainly what I'm saying. And that's why I would love to come and film something that says the county commissioner now understands and they're disavowing that. Boy, would that send a message just like the state law. Let me get this redhead shirt in there. Excuse me, red shirt.
The underlying legal issue with all of this is land use planning or zoning, essentially. Zoning in many aspects is generally accepted by the population. Most people wouldn't want a new hog barn or chicken house put in next to a nice new subdivision, and the public generally accepts that. Could you have any suggestions or ideas for policymakers going forward how to distinguish between reasonable zoning regulations versus the type of agenda that's being pushed here? Because there can be some bleed over. I'm in the legislature, and we had one in particular last year that was actually making a situation better, that we started getting flooded emails saying this is Agenda 21 type of regulation, when it was actually, once you got to the heart of it, it was actually making a bad situation better. How do you distinguish, how do you distinguish between those two issues?
Let me ask you, have you heard the phrase form-based zoning yet? Form-based zoning, or transition, let's see, T1 through T6, transect zoning. That's another phrase. There's, in all of this now, if you begin to read about it, they have zoning overlays which come in with form-based zoning. So now if you put in zoning where you put in an urban growth boundary, Tennessee's already got urban growth boundaries, and by the way, I have slides that show what happens to property values when you put an urban growth boundary, because obviously you can't sell the property on the outside of that urban growth boundary. As a matter of fact, some of the places that have adopted this, you have to have, in order to have a farm, it has to be 160 acres, it has to produce 75% of your income, and if it doesn't do that, then you don't qualify for the tax break that goes with the farm. So what does that mean? You don't get to stay there, you're going to have to move. All right, you can't sell it. So they have transferable development rights, and they have a banker, and there's a number of ways that you could set this up. The banker would come out and credit your farm with so many development rights. Now, on the inside of the urban growth boundary, you have zoning which says that you can only have, say, 4 apartments on a small lot. Well, he buys those transferable development rights, and he gets credits so that he can now have a zoning overlay over what was there, and he can now put in a 10-story apartment building. Carbon credits. The other thing that you need to think about is that we now have community farms that are springing up inside the urban growth boundary, and that would be a zoning overlay, because if this really gets implemented, you want to eat bacon in the morning, you're going to have a pigsty next door. It's just that simple. And you're not going to get in your car, and you're not going to drive to that grocery store and see all of those out-of-season fruits. You're going to see only what's grown locally and what's available locally, and that's going to run the price of food up, because society is not set up. The kind of transition that they're talking about would occur so quickly that the price of food is almost going to be out of reach for everyone. And it'll be done through ordinances and regulations. If these people want to do it, that's fine. And I know people that want to have a hog farm, and now regulations won't allow them to have it unless the government comes in and says how it can be done. I don't want government to get involved in it. I want you to be able to have a hog farm if you want to. But that's not the way. It's already set up to have. As a matter of fact, the Alabama Sustainable Agricultural Network that has money from the federal government, they're setting all this stuff up. And the local farmers that sell locally have to be certified by the local community. Does that make sense? Is that the free enterprise system? No, sir.
The Obama administration supported this Agenda 21 in any way.
Oh yeah, he's got all kind of executive orders dealing with rural development. As a matter of fact, the governor of Alabama, who is a conservative Republican, just went in, hired his Democratic opponent, and put him over the rural development position that did not exist, and it mirrors what's going on at the federal level. Sir.
This doesn't happen overnight. Usually.
Yes.
Gradualism is the key word.
That's
here.
right.
And under the radar is another one.
Exactly.
And they were farther along with this community development than what we are. And they had their county commissioners. They had brought in some liberals, and they had to. They took a year and a half to do this development project. Charged them $200,000 and some $1,000.
250.
Yeah. And when everybody over there, they were really hot, and they were asking him, "Why did you do this to us?" And he says, "We took the federal money. We took the federal grants, and they said, you'll have to do this or pay us back." And I'm reading the newspaper today, Sustainable Development Grant And what? Are there any way we can check to see, are there any little strings attached with that $500,000?
No, you know there's going to be strings. You know that.
I can tell you, from the CDBG grants, there are no strings that I'm aware of that are directly tied to any type of land use. The grant that's in the newspaper, it's federal tax dollars that are passed through the state back to local governments, and it's for use for infrastructure, for installing water lines, for installing sewer lines. There are no strings to this particular grant that say that says Lewis County has to adopt any type of zoning or countywide land use plan for that particular grant.
Let me say that part of NEPA, the quote that you saw, is to create an aesthetically pleasing community for you to reside in. And community block grants are in that report submitted in 2002. So while there won't be any strings that you'll see, but redeveloping that local community so it's aesthetically pleasing for you is part of the redevelopment. And we're spending money we don't have. Does this make sense?
Do we need the federal government to help us with aesthetically pleasing? I think we've got that at Hohenwald before they ever came along. And I'll say this about this is the second thing. Anytime there's a grant dollar, there's another rope wrapped around your neck. Anytime.
Let me say something about grants. In Tuscaloosa, after the storms came through and tore up April 27th, I guess it's been 2 years ago now, the EPA, FEMA, came down and gave them tons of money. And part of the agreement was to rewrite their comprehensive plan. Their comprehensive plan now has Chapter 6 that is totally for sustainable development, and the tenets of it are laced throughout the rest of it. They presented, had to come up with all new ordinances for the redevelopment of the business district that was totally destroyed. And a lot of the people just couldn't afford it. As a matter of fact, one of the auto parts owners was going to have to put his parking lot a block away from his building. And he said, what's the point of having an auto parts store where you can't have the parking lot next door to the store? The McDonald's was going to have to move forward on their lot, and they required them to buy the property behind them in order to meet the code, in order to have enough parking spaces for the business. They couldn't afford it. They moved somewhere else. There was a comparison done between Joplin, Missouri, where Joplin was destroyed much like Tuscaloosa, and they did not accept federal money, and they allowed all the zoning permits to go through without a hitch, and they got up and running, I think, in less than 6 months, and Tuscaloosa is still having problems, and I can put you in touch with people that are having similar problems, still don't have their business running. One other thing is that I have a letter that was given to me from the economic development guru of Alabama to a mayor in North Alabama. And after the same storms hit his community, this mayor wanted to put a storm shelter on the park in that community. And this letter said, because your community has accepted money, and I can't remember the name of the trust, the trust was originally created by the federal government in the 60s. You no longer own the property, but are managers of it because you have accepted this money. And I went back and looked at it. There's no telling how much money flowed out of Washington from the 1960s forward. And here this mayor now had to submit his plan to, I can't remember what department of the government it was, in order to get permission to put the storm shelter on the property that he thought the city owned.
Just a quick point. I think what really matters is what we all think and what we do together as a community. And I would say that conflict is good, and we're seeing some of that today, and more of that needs to come out. I left the Northeast, where I lived under a semi-socialist communist regime, to where income taxes and property taxes and the regulations were just killing people. I spent 5 years researching where I would go when I had an opportunity to move, and we picked Tennessee, and specifically picked Hohenwald. So there's an enormous amount of desire here to really move away from any semblance of control by the federal and to operate at the city, county, and the state levels. What's happening nationally, and I'll tell you because I've lived in 12 states, what's happening nationally is people are now picking specific locations where people have the values, the sense of independence, freedom, responsibility, and accountability that they believe in. If you don't believe in that, go to New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, California. You believe it, you go to Montana, South Dakota, Tennessee, Alabama, North Carolina. So having been here just 6 months, I can tell you that everyone that I've met, regardless of what walk of life they're from, all have the same values that I had, that I spent 25 years in the military for. So what we have is now a chance to redefine ourselves with the terminology of today, not of yesterday, and move forward. And it's incumbent upon our elected officials to now look for anything that smells of control from a shadow government that's being put in place through all the organizations in the private and public sector coming together. And I feel confident that we're going to do that in Lewis County, or I wouldn't have moved here.
Wait a minute, I've got, let me say one thing. Let's say that first, don't use the terminology that's in this book. Use your own terminology. And if you do use the terminology that's in here, you need to define it in the document that you signed or whatever you write so that it makes a distinction separate from what this agenda is. Okay? Okay, so, right. So now let's say that you've got the chance to rewrite and rescind this and redefine in the new proclamation what you mean sustainable development means. Add to that you would love to see an anti-Agenda 21 bill pass in your state legislature, just like Alabama has done, supporting your position that you don't support this, you support true sustainability of the individual. That guy had his hand up.
Well, I was back when you hit about redefine, but what you just said is right. I mean, as far as being self-sufficient, I think that that's something that we... And I would applaud that. If you're attaching yourself in any way, form, or fashion to the Agenda 21, I would not applaud that in any way at all. But and I see what you're saying is if we're not careful, we start using their words, and then even though we detest what they are, the world looks at us and say, or our country looks at us and say, you're part of that Agenda 21 because you're using the same words. Exactly. We hate what they're...
Yes. Yes. Sir.
I wanted to make a suggestion to a neighbor. I heard that explained by that man better than anyone I've heard in the past 2 weeks. I want to remind you, this is America. If our politicians can't do it, you run for office yourself and do it. And we need you.
I'll come campaign for you.
That's what he's trying to do right now.
Yeah. Sir, this gentleman right here has got something to say.
Well, first of all, I want to say thanks to Ben Ward for what the statement he made and willing to make adjustments when adjustments are needed. We live in a country that's supposed to be free, and we don't need people from some uneducated country, and I'm uneducated myself, but we don't need some heathen country coming here and telling us how to run this country, do we?
No.
Well, why go to Australia? And they're a smart country. It's a beautiful country. Why go to South Africa? Why can't we do our own? Another thing, when you take a gift, I become your slave forever. I'll forever be your slave if I take your gift.
That's right.
That's right.
Yes, exactly.
That's Bible.
The UN has played a big part in this, has it not?
Wait,
I hadn't heard it.
wait a minute, ma'am. And I'll get to you in just a minute. Go ahead.
The UN has played a big part in this. I hadn't heard it mentioned tonight.
Oh, yeah, most definitely. Well, it's a UN conference.
Okay.
Okay?
And when you take federal dollars as for a tax grant, who do you think is giving all those tax dollars to the federal government? My dollars that I go to work for every single day, like everybody else in this room, we all are paying for those free federal grants.
Well, now, in this case, true sustainability would mean disavowing that grant and sending it back to Washington. You're going to be dependent on your own resources.
Self-sufficient.
Anything else? We're making progress, I think.
I got that.
Well, if we don't have any, I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
The Lewis County Commission is now called to order. Mayor Van Ward will be presiding.
Anyone that have business to bring before this committee at the proper times to raise their hand and be recognized by the chairman.
Lewis County Republican Party Chairman, and I would request a couple of minutes to speak before the resolution on Transition Town. The Transition Town Initiative, when it was signed in 2009, is understandable why it was signed, and it was really not on anybody's radar at the time of what this program was. The Transition Town program was started in Europe by a gentleman named Rob Hopkins, who is a classic European Fabian socialist. It is tied directly into United Nations Agenda 21, which is nothing more than a vehicle to be quite possibly the biggest seizure of private property in the history of the world, in the guise of doing something in favor of the environment. It has nothing to do with the environment, I assure you. There's not one savory character amongst the founders of any of these programs. Gro Brundtland, chairman of the World Socialist Party, Maurice Strong, a thug, an international criminal that should be in prison right now. This program has very little to do with the environment and everything to do with advancing communism in our country. I am an American citizen. I'm not a peasant. I'm not a subject. I'm not a slave. I love my country. The same document, our Constitution and our Bill of Rights, that gives me the ability to lecture or to address this commission is the same document that gives Albert Bates, out at the farm, a United Nations ambassador, the freedom to engage in communal life, engage in whatever religious activity they want to. Communal life is not for me. And I would bet that communal life is not for a lot of people in this room. I don't understand why more people aren't outraged that a person is sitting in this county gobbling up federal grant money, taxpayer-funded federal grants, to build a model for a program that is going to strip me of my private property rights, along with the right to choose how many children I want to have, what kind of vehicle I can drive, where I can buy my food, what I can grow in my garden. I see where this is headed, and it doesn't look good. With the rescinding of the Transition Town Proclamation, we will send a message to the rest of the country that our private property is not for sale. Thank you.
Our next order of business will be ordinance 10-2412, resolution to rescind Transition Town Proclamation. Is there any discussion? Mr. Turner.
Now, this UN Agenda 21 was adopted back in 1992, and 20 years later, some people are worried about it. Now, I'm a guy who worries about stuff, and my senior partner used to say if I didn't have anything to worry about, I'd make up something to worry about. And I think somebody's making up something to worry about. This thing contains 300 pages. When this Agenda 21 was adopted, but this thing, like everything the UN does, is a non-binding, non-enforceable thing that was not in any way being pushed by the executive part of our government. It was not ratified or confirmed by the Senate, nor debated by it. And when in 1999, when you made this county a transition county, it didn't amount to a bag of beans, and if you repeal it, it doesn't amount to a bag of beans now.
This summit has cemented a new vision
of sustainable development. The Johannesburg Plan of Action consolidates our work plans into one common agenda that includes our best thinking on sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, President Bush and the American people have an enduring commitment to sustainable development.
We have coalesced around an outcome document that marks a real advance for sustainable development. We know this is one of the most pressing matters of our time because how we grow together over the long term isn't a question for only some countries. It is a question for all countries. A more prosperous future is within our reach. A future where all people benefit from sustainable development, no matter who they are or where they live. And that is why in the 21st century, the only viable development is sustainable development. We also have to be thinking different about development in our cities. Under the joint initiative on urban sustainability that President Rousseff and President Obama kicked off last year, we are bringing political officials from every level, from state, county, local, municipalities together, along with industry leaders and developers to find creative ways to generate sustainable economic growth. Let's use the private sector, particularly the consumer goods companies, as they have agreed to do, to make sure they have sustainable supply chains, the right kind of packaging and marketing that puts the least amount of burden on the earth we share. Let's bring in the nonprofits, the civil society organizations, faith groups, individuals, all of us committed to realizing the sustainable development goals that we have embraced. We know that we will be judged not by what we say, nor even by what we intend to do, but by whether we deliver results for people alive today and whether we keep faith with future generations. I'm very honored to be here with all of you, and I pledge my country's, the Obama administration's, and my own personal efforts to continue our work together. We simply cannot afford to fail. Thank you all very much.
So do whatever you want, but don't feel like you're doing something great for the people, because this doesn't amount to anything. Either way.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Mrs. Sharp.
I agree with Landis. First of all, I did go to the Major Benefit Park the other night on June 21, and it was a very informative meeting, and I think we all need to be aware of Agenda 21. I don't think it's something that we really need to take lightly because we don't ever know what the future holds. So I do agree with that, and I think it's a very informative meeting, and I enjoyed that part of the meeting. But I have to agree with Landis on some things. A lot of times things are just where you rechange the definition of wording. And at the time that the Sun and Shine group started 6 years ago, how many of you were here when we had the music festival out on the lawn out here? We had all of the arts and the crafts and the arts, and we had the greens and cars with alternative energy. Those were part of what the festival was at that time. And as time comes along, it has set up to where that what this group's original commission intent was to try to take the things in our county, try to find those things that we might could do to try to help the economic need of our county. For instance, working with the Amish. I know there's one of the commissioners here who do about fruits from them. It's trying to take care, sustain our local economy, and try to buy locally to try to support ourselves locally and economically, because at this time our unemployment rate was so high. So on one hand, yes, I certainly agree with passing a resolution that says that we do not agree with Agenda 21, but I do not see why we should go back to 2009 and try to rescind something that absolutely had nothing to do. Agenda 21 will not see Agenda 21 anywhere in that proclamation. If you look at what that proclamation was in 2009. So yes, I support a proclamation that does not support Agenda 21, but I do not support rescinding the proclamation for our local folks.
Anyone else?
Well,
Excuse me, go ahead.
I had asked just about everybody on this court to be down there, and the only ones that were down there was myself, Bonnie, and you. And I really think that they really missed a good presentation, and I am really, really proud that Connie showed up, because she had some people down there that you had to look one way and the other is another one. But, my wife, she done more checking on this than I did, and they are things in there that goes with that Agenda 21, but it's like, she said it's the wording of it. And the word that we might think means one thing, you in that bunch, they mean it means something else. And I don't have anything to do with anything to do with it, so I'm gonna have to vote to receive it.
Is there anyone else? As I sat down there that night at that meeting, I was one of the ones that signed that resolution, or that proclamation. But some of the wording does go along with the wording of Agenda 21. And I have an email from State Representative Joey Hensley that says that the Tennessee legislature this year passed a resolution to say we are opposed to Agenda 21 and do not agree with the aspects contained in Agenda 21. And I agree with the folks who brought us that proclamation at that time, and the commissioners who voted for it. We had actually did not know that it had anything to do with Agenda 21. All good people, and I had the best intentions for this county and this town. I would say that I personally, if I could vote on it, I would vote to rescind it, because it does have language that is part of Agenda 21, and I think we, as a community, need to send a message that we don't want to have any part, as the state legislature did, that we don't want to have any part in Agenda 21 that the United Nations has come up with. Are there any other questions or comments? If not, we'll vote on Resolution 10-2412 to rescind Transition Town Proclamation, and it might be best if we do a roll call vote. Ms. Clayton.
Jerry Ashmore.
Yes.
Jason Haygood.
Yes.
Bobby Barnes.
Yes.
Brian Perry.
Yes.
Roger Staley.
Yes.
Charles Talley.
Yes.
Terry Henson.
Yes.
Jonah Keltner.
Yes.
Shane Blackwood.
Yes.
Jim Dunn.
Yes.
Raymond Lomas.
Yes.
Landis Turner.
Abstain.
Leon Hunter. John Booker.
Yes.
Connie Sharp.
No.
Rick Brewer.
Yes.
Chris Dyer.
Yes.
15-1-1, the resolution passes. We will return to our regular agenda. The next item on that, our agenda is the report of the county mayor.